So I am thrilled for Banging Rocks episode 6 to have you with us, Fairlith. Fairlith Harvey is an amazing writer, performer, director, wearer of many, many different hats and many festive outfits, as we can see. Fairlith.
It's New Year.
Yeah, that's right. Happy New Year. It's going to be interesting talking about sort of where we've been this past year and what's coming up for this upcoming one. So I'd love to start by just hearing a little bit for folks, like, what do you do? There's so many different pieces that you do, but what have you been doing as of late? How would you describe, one way that we
Gosh.
sometimes start is, what are your superpowers and what do you do with them?
Ooh, okay. I think my superpower is coming up with really good ideas and having the follow through to come to make them happen. I'm trying. I wouldn't usually describe my ideas as really good, but my New Year's resolution is to believe in myself. So
Your
I
ideas
think
are really good.
thank you. I think my superpower is sort of being able to envision something that is not just for me, but that I love, that I think other people will love, and usually that manifests as some kind of live performance, but or a party, or a scavenger hunt. Just, I really like bringing joy to people, and sharing with them sort of my ideas about inclusion and kindness and warmth, without being heavy-handed in my messages. Is my goal anyway.
Yeah. So for, especially because there's so many types of things that you create, to maybe give an example, do you want to, the first thing I saw of yours was Alice in Glitterland and was just totally blown away by this as this immersive interactive piece. Do you want to maybe describe a little bit of that? I mean, even just from ideation to execution, so people have a sense of some of the kind of things you do.
Well, Alice in Glitterland had a very interesting journey. I really love stories about young girls going on adventures and having to kind of make their way, like Dorothy or Wendy or Alice. And the lovely thing about Alice in Wonderland is it is in the public domain. So my first idea, I explore different kinds of media through burlesque parody a lot. I think it's interesting to see different kinds of sexuality and gender and background represented on stage in a familiar framework of a piece of media people might enjoy. So that was where the idea started, and I thought, a burlesque show, and then maybe like a blacklight puppet show, and I couldn't think of it. And then immersive theater started. This was like 8 years ago. Immersive theater started being a more and more big deal in New York, and immersive theater borrows more from like video gaming than from traditional musicals, plays, whatever. You enter an immersive environment. It's very similar to VR, but real. And then the play happens around you or to you, just depending on the work. And when I saw my first immersive show in New York, I was so taken by it. I had been all musical theater all the time in high school. Like, I had Phantom of the Opera in my Walkman, and my love of what immersive theater can do and the reversal of the audience and actor contract is so fascinating to me that there was nothing else. So we got the historic Wise Hall for the show, which is a really old theater building that does a lot of sort of indie projects. We cleaned it all out, and we built a 60s cabaret palace of Alice in Wonderland that you could walk around and explore. On stage, backstage, dressing rooms, the main ballroom. We built a bar within the bar. And the story of Alice in Wonderland then just happens around you through this sort of like 60s cabaret lens, all through dance, very little dialogue, so anyone can understand and participate in the show. And different tactile things to play with. There was, I know it sounds weird in a pandemic, but there was a ball pit, and there was a plexiglass window on the side of the ball pit. So if you wanted to, you could watch the whole show from inside the ball pit, and sometimes the actors would jump in and do a scene, surprise. There's a little hat shop we built within the room. There was a whole tea party where you could join in and sit and get fed and given tea and dance with the actors. In the dressing rooms, more drama was happening backstage, and again, all told through dance. It was a 70-minute show with 11 hours of discoverable content in it. So you would have to see it almost every day of the run to see the whole thing. And that was just, I think that's my favorite thing I've ever built, and I really loved it. And it was really nice that you came and saw the potential for virtual reality mixing with this immersive theater style, and I think that's just the most epic idea.
Yeah, I can't wait to explore and play with that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Just to say a couple of things that I love about your approach to it is, you were doing some really neat sort of synchrony between the different spaces. So by using music to tie everything together, having it so that with each experience through, you sort of have those themes that are weaving in and out. So it's not just these discrete pieces of content, but sort of this whole symphony of content that you have to go through again and again to get the access to. Um, and it's interesting because, you know, you describe it as the story of Alice in Wonderland, but really it's so many of the different themes that you chose to kind of pull out and elaborate on. And I'd love to hear a bit more about where you find, even just in a single work like that, the places of inspiration are the parts that you find most exciting. Because again, when you were talking about inclusion and diversity and sort of discovery and personal growth in those different pieces, like all of those really seems to be heavy in there. But yeah, I'd love to hear more about, like, what are the themes that you find exciting to work with?
Oh gosh. Most of my work examines perspectives that I think have been suppressed. So I often examine emotional abuse in my pieces, and how situations aren't black and white, and the perspective of an abuser versus the perspective of a victim. Not excusing an abuser ever, but just like, I know that no one thinks of themselves as a villain. So that's a major theme in Alice in Glitterland, is just trying to grow up and find your identity without other people pressing what they think you should be onto you. And to me, that's the main theme of Alice in Glitterland. There's a lot of different themes. And the interesting thing to me about any immersive piece, not just my own, is you could choose to follow Alice from beginning to end and get not a totally straightforward, but you'd be able to recognize this journey that she goes through. But you could also just choose to follow the White Rabbit for the whole show and see what he's up to when he's not with Alice. And then you'll meet up with Alice when he intersects with her. And everybody has their own theme. Like, and I mean, theme is a word I really play with loosely. And I know theme is supposed to be one thing, but you can do whatever you want if you're an artist. And to me, like, there was the March Hare, whose theme was the jealousy of being overlooked. There was the caterpillar turns into a butterfly and leaves Glitterland, and to me that story is about the journey of just having enough and being like mature enough to leave a situation with no one guiding you. And so there's a lot of different themes at play there. And that's the other thing I like about immersive theater, is you can tell a lot of different stories and it still remains cohesive, and people can find and be attracted to the part of the story that they need to watch or listen to at that time.
I love it. One of the things that's interesting is, I mean, in the work you do, because it's so many different people having to intersect in ways that are a lot more complex than traditional theater, you need to have a certain set of people who you're working with that. And I'd love to hear more about, like, what for you are the hallmarks of the people who you love to work with, and kind of the communities that you like to engage with.
Well, it's really important to me that everyone who collaborates with me is doing so in a, like, how can we make this inclusive to the audience, coming from that place. So it's really important that when we're casting, we're not thinking about a type. So basically, I just enjoy working with people who are eager to push the form into a more fun place, as opposed to a gatekeeping club.
For people who haven't been exposed to that kind of world, do you want to maybe unpack a little bit more about that whole piece around type and how that sort of, how that plays out in theater versus how that plays out in what you do?
Totally. Well, theater and film are both, you don't have power usually over how you're cast unless you're making your own work. And so I thought I wanted to be an actor, and I went to musical theater school, and they told me that you can be sluts and villains. And I mean, this is who I am. I'm a pink, sparkly just, I'm an ingenue, I'm just like tall and bigger and more voluptuous. And I just thought, like, I'm not interested in exploring those stories exclusively. And I came home and just thought, no, I want to create a world where like anybody can play a princess, anybody can play a villain. Fat people find love, queer people find love, people of all backgrounds and races, like everybody, and just love connects everybody. And I think it's such a waste of time to decide that the way someone looks informs what their character on stage should be. Hi, Phoebe. And I just reject it like out of hand. And like, it's not really radical. I just don't think it's a nice place to create art from, in typecasting people. It's right. Nemo, I also ended up playing a lot of men, and I mean, it's fine, but I think that the next generation of theater makers can have more imagination than this skinny girl will be Cinderella and this fat girl will be the stepsister and this man will be the stepmother, probably. That's fine. I agree that pantomimes are a good example of inclusive theater, but like the tradition of pantomime comes way back yonder. And while like a woman will play the prince in panto, the original reason was so that she could show off her legs. So it is inclusive, but it's from sort of a weird tradition of being pervy. And I mean, furthermore, it's like, I'm not on the transgender spectrum, really. I don't mind being called they, and I think that's a wonderful thing. But I also respect that transgender women find the man in a dress trope to be harmful. And like panto is very centered around, there's a bumbling fat old lady played by a man, and that's played off as a joke. So yes, pantomimes are very inclusive, but I also think we can do better, and we can just like keep striving towards that world of anybody can be anything. Like, I mean, the three of us can play the Three Musketeers. It doesn't matter. As long as we can, swing a sword, Phoebe, Daniel, and Fairlith as the Three Musketeers would be amazing.
Yay.
There's no reason not to have that. So that's sort of how I feel about that. And all of my collaborators are on the same page as that. There's no like, well, like this Black girl can't be the princess. No, it's just a waste of time to even think that way. I hate it. So that's where that is from in my heart.
One of the other things and that kind of going back to, you were talking a little bit about sort of the burlesque side, and like again, that seems like it's another focal point that you use, or kind of a lens for looking at body positivity, sexuality positivity, and just fun and play, and sort of normalization of all of those different pieces. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like, how did you get into that world, and about what you've created there? Because you've done a lot in that space.
Well, thank you for saying so. It's funny. My first professional musical theater job after I got back from school in New York was in a musical about a burlesque, I guess, cabaret, like a house of burlesque. And the plot of the show was that the people creating the art wanted to make like really out there stuff that might be kind of alienating to the audience. And a producer comes in and says, "You're really talented, but you're alienating your audience." And that's the conflict. And I had never done anything like that before, but I did it and I really enjoyed it. And cabaret is amazing. And I was tickled by the idea that burlesque is a 5-minute performance crafted entirely by you. So you create your dance, or you hire someone, but theoretically, you create your dance, you create your costume, you create your concept, you pick your music, you pick your lighting, you do everything, and then you're part of a variety show. And I think, amazing, already very inclusive. But I also noticed that, a lot of the people getting hired as headliners and stuff were thinner people, and that people who had classical dance training were getting more. So it was like, it is inclusive, but only up to a certain level. And I was like, I didn't like that very much. So I thought, what if we combine my love of musical theater and burlesque, and see what we can make out of that? And it's been really lovely, because you'll have a cast of between 15 and 30 people usually. And they're all different body types, and it's about their chutzpah. So when I'm casting a musical in, or like a burlesque play kind of thing, we will put different levels of dancers as different roles, but everybody's included. So if you're an Ewok, you might be a beginner dancer. If you're a stormtrooper, you might be advanced. If you're an AT-ST, you might be like a professional dancer. Those are just examples. And that way everyone can be included. Every body type is shown on stage, and the audience has this lens of seeing a parody of a popular thing they like Star Wars or The Wizard of Oz or Labyrinth, any of the things we've done. And it's really led people to connect with us as performers, regardless of what we look like. And it's been really nice. And there are, as Misha is saying in the chat, there are a lot of thicker women in burlesque shows because it's the only place you can go on stage and be yourself and show everybody in the audience that, like, this is just who I am, and you can cheer for it or not, but this is what I want to show myself being, and it's very powerful.
I'd love to hear a little bit more. Thank you so much. That's amazing. What are some of the sort of the themes or the projects that have been occupying you lately and that you're excited about? What have you been kind of working on or looking towards?
Well, a few things. I've been developing a parody musical with some people in my theater troupe called The Ring and Die. It's about Lord of the Rings. And the plan for that is, I love Lord of the Rings movies. I'm not complaining about them. I love them. They're amazing. Thanks, Nemo. Achievements. I can't even. I feel like Stephen Colbert and my face is getting hot. But there are no Black people in those movies. There are no unusual body types outside of, like, dwarves are chubby, hobbits are we say they're chubby, but they're just filmed chubby. They're not really chubby. Elves are all slender. Like, you can't be an elf unless you're tall and slender, like all this stuff. And everybody's white. And I just thought, like, well, let's just not do that then. And that's where that came from. Is just, I want to see how more imagination would have benefited that film trilogy. And that's an impossible thing to say. Peter Jackson has an amazing imagination, but let's make most of the hobbits, like, let's make Frodo and Sam girls just for fun. Maybe let's, like, have Boromir do a little examination of himself and what's happening to him, and just sort of it's fan fiction meets what if this was a real musical comedy meets, like, what if the world was a little more inclusive, and I think it'll be really lovely. More seriously, I've been working on a historical piece called Kill the Ripper, about 3 Victorian sex workers who decide they need to take matters into their own hands and learn self-defense, which I really love, and it really developed into something that I feel very positive about. And I mean, the end of the play is in the title. There are bad things that happen to those women, but I made sure there's no sexual assault as part of the plot. Like, it's mentioned a couple of times that that's a reality, but, like, I wanted to Schitt's Creek it and just make it a world where the stakes are high, but no one had to suffer, like, a real bad tragedy to have the story come out. And there's a lesbian love story in it. Nobody dies. There's a sort of tragic love story where, like, no one ends up angry in the end. The Ripper doesn't kill anybody aside from the people he historically killed. So I'm feeling very proud about that. Reading the chat. Sorry, I was involved with areas back in. Oh, that sounds really cool. Like, gymnastics was really an inclusive place for you. That's beautiful. And if Gollum had a disability, I wouldn't write the character to have a disability. Like, I wouldn't be like, Gollum has cerebral palsy, but what I would write on my casting thing is I would say, any actor with any disability, please come in and we'll develop a kind of dance that works together. So I would love to cast Gollum as a person with cerebral palsy. I wouldn't have someone put on crutches and pretend to have it. Oh, I see. Ariel's like Ariel's silks were inclusive. That's wonderful. That sounds amazing. I was always too scared to do gymnastics as a kid. I was scared of falling on my head. Any not being on the ground. Very stressful. You've done so much.
One of the things that I love about your approach in each of the different ways, so in terms of the material and in terms of the people and in terms of how you interact with the audience and respect them, is it's all so non-exploitative. So, when it's something like Lord of the Rings or Alice in Wonderland that you're working with, it's not, here's a quick like a scaffolding that I can throw into the thing. Like you immerse yourself in the material and you know it backwards and forwards, and you really like, rather than here's Boromir and he looks kind of like this, so we can have him do this kind of a dance. It's you like saying, here's a whole complex personal like family dynamic that's going on there, and so here's how we're going to explore that.
Yeah, let's sing a funny song about it, but like we need to know. But I mean, that's the other thing. If you're writing parody about nerdy beloved things, about anything really, if something's famous enough to be parodied, then people really love it. And I think where parody goes into the realm of being unsuccessful is when you're making fun of instead of laughing with.
Yeah.
Everybody who loves, since we're talking about Lord of the Rings, everyone who loves Lord of the Rings like knows that there's only white people in it. We don't need to like be like, these movies are shitty. We just need to be like, hey, here's some diversity, huh? And everyone they're on board. But if you say this movie's shitty, then you lose your audience. And I just think people react, especially when the future is so hard and people keep saying the world is so hard. I think people really react to warmth on stage, in video games, anything.
Yeah, and that mixture, I mean, again, I find is such a neat thing that you bring so solidly to the pieces of there's this warmth and love and compassion for the material and the people and such, and you push, like you're not afraid to push and nudge. But yeah, it's amazing and pretty unique to see the degree to which you do that is amazing. I'd love to hear a little bit about like how you talked a bit about sort of your journey into that burlesque side of things, but just generally, how did you go from somebody who was a fan of musical theater and loved this into doing the work that you're doing? What was that journey kind of like?
Well, okay, I saw Cats when I was 10. And it's the right age to see Cats on stage. Like, say what you will about that movie, but like seeing Cats on stage when you're a 10-year-old girl is like, oh. And that show is a little bit immersive. I don't know if you've ever seen Cats live.
Yeah.
But they come into the audience and they interact with you in a very safe way. And I came out of that with an emotion that I can't pinpoint, that I've never felt again exactly, that was just like possibility. But I didn't really think, I loved writing and I didn't really think about being a playwright, and I just thought about being an actor. And so from the time I was 6, because I saw the Mikado and also connected with that, but that is very racist and I don't watch it anymore. I started full-time dance, I started full-time singing, and honestly, I'm okay, but acting really wasn't my path. Oh my God, Memory is an amazing song. Say what you will about Cats, Memory's great. So as you very kindly said of me, I steeped myself in it. I learned everything I could learn about the theory. And I mean, I'm glad I know so much about musical theater. And I think that the knowledge base I have is wonderful, but I'm just not as focused on acting anymore. I'm not sure if that really answered your question, but I just want to be involved with theater in any way. And the reason I find theater so magical, I think now, is that I realize that I'm neurodiverse and I have difficulty focusing on things. And what we think it is ADHD, but you know, it's hard to know without going in there and poking around, I guess. And I find it very difficult to focus on anything. But theater, I have to put my cell phone away and I have to be present. And it's like something in my brain gives way and lets me just be completely present. So it's just a very special, I guess, spiritual thing for me to just be there, existing and being in the moment.
Yeah, that makes great sense. So if you could give sort of advice to either young Fairlith or someone else who's in that sort of camp of wanting to get involved in really playing in the way that you do, in the work that you do, what would you want to tell them?
Well, I mean, take it with a grain of salt because I'm saying it now, but producing is not difficult. If you have money, it's extra easy. If you don't, it doesn't matter. It's all about finding solutions. Like during the pandemic, before we got really locked down, I thought maybe I'll run a tiny immersive thing for 4 people in my backyard. And I didn't because they really locked us down. But you just have to have the chutzpah and the wherewithal to be like, all right, I'm going to call all these people. I'm going to get this venue. I'm going to negotiate. Like, I have a deal at a local theater where I don't have to rent the space. I pay nothing. It's a 60-40 split and they split the expenses with me. But I had to start that by knowing like believing in myself, and I started working at the theater to show them that I was talented. So I was hosting Rocky Horror for them for 2 years. I put on a couple of shows that they were interested in having, and eventually, like when I felt like I'd built up enough credit, I was like, please let me prove myself to you by putting on a full show. And they said okay, and then it just went on from there. So honestly, it's the same advice everybody would give you, but just like believe in yourself. There's nothing to doing to trying something, and the only thing that can stop you is really yourself, because if one venue says no, there are 80 million more. You can get a permit to perform at the park. You can do guerrilla theater at the park if you want to. You can say, hey, sign up for this outdoor show and I'll tell you the location on the day, like whatever. So I would say just like don't allow, yes, Misha, exactly, don't let naysayers push you around, don't listen to them. And I would also say that don't allow yourself to get bogged down in the social media of it all. I'm in a lot of groups for on Facebook and stuff for writing, just to see what people are up to, where they're submitting and stuff, especially because I'm trying to learn more about screenwriting. And a lot of it is very negative, and I I just think to myself that failure isn't really an option. Like, if no one buys this screenplay, I'll turn it into a graphic novel, because I believe in the stories that I want to tell, and I just want to see what'll happen. You get one life. Yeah.
One question around that, because it's such an interesting sort of interface between, on the one hand, I mean, you strike me as someone who's very empathic and is clearly very, very tuned in to people's emotions and care about them. And working in a field that where you get a whole range of different reactions to what it is that you're doing, and have to be able to weather all of those as well. How do you find that? How do you find the that mixture of being someone who I think is sensitive, in an environment where you have a lot of emotional inundation that can maybe happen?
It's hard. To quickly touch on Nemo's follow-up question, insurance is not that expensive, really, and many venues have it. So if it's not something you can do for yourself, go and join the Fringe Festival. They'll set it up for you. There's always a way. There's always a way. And I think after the pandemic, live theater is going to come back as a trickle, and then very strongly, because we're vaccinated. But as for being a sensitive human being, which I am definitely very sensitive, I have severe rejection sensitive dysphoria, but not about my work. I don't know why. I'll be sad if someone says they don't like it, but I always think if I have tried my very best and I know that I have, then I never have to feel bad. Even if that is not like the best of someone else, I know it's my best. Being a leader has been difficult, and I would rather just kind of write and throw people my stuff and let them have it, but I know that's not realistic. So I always just try to think with my heart and my head. And if for example, like two actors have a problem, I'm pretty good at separating myself from it, because to be completely honest with you, my art is the most important thing to me. And if people aren't having a good time, the art's going to be bad. But also, I don't want to waste time arguing. I just want to get back on the same page. So I mean, I just do my best to react as maturely and well as I can. And if I react badly, then I also do my best to be like, uh, uh, unreservedly and humbly apologize. And I think the art of apologizing is a very important thing to learn. Not that I have to use it a lot, but when you do, otherwise things just spiral.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing the difference between when someone sees and feels a heartfelt actual, like, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
versus the kind of things that are all too typical, especially in that sort of acting world of like, here's the way that I can try to deflect as much as possible while officially having said sorry for something or other. So
Yeah.
no, that's neat.
No, exactly.
What do you, how would you sort of characterize your trajectory of like what you have been doing to what you're kind of excited to be leaning into or working on next?
Well, I always want to go as far as I can. I just kind of want to see what'll happen. So currently, I'm applying for awards for Kill the Ripper, which I worked on for about a year and a half. And if I win any, it'll just help me back up being able to tour. My intention with this show is to I wrote it as an experiment. So I have about 5 years I've given myself to do a Vancouver premiere, win some awards, go on tour for 6 months, and then, I don't know, go to Broadway. I'm just going to see how far it can go for 5 years. And if it doesn't go any further than a Vancouver premiere, I already have that. I don't mind. We'll just see, you know?
This will be the clip that after it's like running for years on Broadway will get shown of you talking about like, well, maybe it'll be a thing, or yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice? And then other things I have coming up is I'm really excited to collaborate with you and see what we can do with immersive theater meets virtual reality. And I mean, that's the kind of thing that maybe people would write newspapers articles about. As long as you believe in your own original ideas and you can at least muster up enough fake it till you make it where you can tell other people they should believe in it too and why, then you're great. Just any project you're making, your elevator pitch is the most important thing. You need to be able to, when people say, what's it about? You have to be able to be like, oh, well, 3 sex workers living in Whitechapel in 1888 are really worried about Jack the Ripper. So they come together and they learn to fight and then they track him down and they kill him. And that's it. Any project. A New Hope is like the Muppet Show meets Moulin Rouge, and it's like a nativity play of Star Wars, but sexy. So that's the important thing. Is just, you don't even have to really believe in yourself. You just have to write down all the things you need to say to fool other people into thinking you believe in yourself. And eventually you will probably start to believe in yourself, even if it's a little bit. It's helpful.
Nice. When you talk about that piece around looking at sort of the combining immersive interactive theater and virtual reality and those pieces, what do you find most intriguing or most interesting about that? What are you most excited to sort of play with that?
I think people are going to really be able to suspend their disbelief in that show. I think people are going to be eager to really LARP it. And I think that will be a really beautiful thing to watch. That's really my main thing is when people, I don't want to spoil too much because everyone's going to see the show, I'm sure. But when people take their headsets off and see the changes that happen around them while they're playing the video game, I think it'll just be something really wonderful and surprising. And I just can't wait for people to experience this new kind of thing. Whenever people feel really seen by an artist in the context of an immersive work, I found that they really feel like physically hugged. And just any immersive show, I'm just so eager to have people tell me that they felt special while they were at it. Mm. Phoebe's asking about how my thoughts on how social anxiety fits into all of these things. Well, I have a lot of social anxiety and I'm working hard to not get rid of it, but manage it. And for immersive theater, one of the things I've worked into is always a consent system. Every show I do has like a consent sash you wear so people can touch you, and an audience trainer who will tell you like the degree to which you're going to be touched, or like just give you an idea of what's coming. And you can opt out. I mean, I'm not sure for Dr. Tomorrow if you would be able to opt out, but then we would put a very strong disclaimer and content warning so that you could decide for yourself if it's something you'd be able to handle. On the performer side, I don't get a lot of social anxiety if I have rehearsed enough when I'm going in front of the audience. If I haven't, I am really scared because I'm having to think too hard while I'm performing in front of people. When it comes to, I mean, like I'm sweating a lot right now in this interview, but when it comes to like finding contacts and everything, we're really lucky to live in the internet age where you can toil over an email to make your first impression often. And honestly, weed is legal in BC. If you're not going to drive and you're going to have like a meeting with someone and the only thing you're like shaking and everything, fucking write down everything you want to say and then take a puff of marijuana, do whatever you need to do to create your art. Like there's no one who's going to tell you you can't do that. Just find what you need to do to make your superpowers work and then do it.
So for you, we sort of said the Happy New Year at the beginning of the year, but it's been such a wild year. And then the next year looks like it's going to be interesting and intense and so many different themes of intensity woven into this past year. Mm-hmm. What for you has that been like? And are there any kind of takeaways as we're looking at 21 for you, either professionally or personally, that you're kind of holding on to?
To be honest with you, I enjoyed the chance to have a great pause. It's hard for me not to see my friends, but I have been producing content at such a rate for such a long time that it's been nice to be able to sort of relax and take my time with the script instead of having a deadline on it. Like if I have to write a Star Wars show, especially the recent ones, the show's on May the 4th, the movie comes out in December. And that's just the nature of it. It's parody, and I don't know if something like The Last Jedi is going to go into people's brains in the same way that A New Hope did. So we have to do the shows right away so they remember them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, interesting. And is there anything, do you think you're going to be able to keep a little bit of that, that pace and pause moving into the new year as things shift? Or is that probably going to ramp back up to sort of the crazy pace that it was before?
It always ramps back up. But my hope is that in this time of pause that I can create enough work at my own pace that I will have a head start when I get back. And I'm hoping that head start will affect the rest of my life, and that the wisdom that I've picked up of like how much taking your time is beneficial will affect the rest of my life as well. Even though I hate taking my time, I want to just like splash everything on the wall immediately. It was a good lesson.
When you described that, I remember, I think I was maybe 12 or something when I first went to go see Cats, and that same, just that feeling of this like magic, awe, and wonder of like something interesting is happening here.
Yeah.
And when you describe that feeling of that, that feeling of potential that was kind of there for you at the end, when people come out of one of your shows, what are the things that you hope are there for them? What do you want them to be coming out feeling?
I want an audience to come out of any of my shows or creations feeling seen. Even like in a non-immersive show, I want them to be able to relate to the people on stage and be like, I could do that, or I can be brave like them in my own context. A lot of people say I'm, for example, brave just for existing in my body, but I don't really have a choice. And I hope the more people see us, like all of us with our diverse body types and backgrounds and genders and everything, the more people see us, the more it'll be normalized in their head. And I hope that they'll be able to find the courage to pursue the identity that they want to live the life that they want to. And when they come out of an immersive show, I want everyone to feel like that they're special, and that we think that they're special, and we think that it's wonderful that they want to share something just made to be beautiful together. So yeah, I really, it's important to me to shift the audience actor contract so that we're applauding for them more than they're applauding for us.
I love it. What are the questions that like either I should have asked, or what would be something that you might want to talk about that the framework that we've given so far for our time doesn't really fit in?
Gosh, how much time do we have?
We've got a fair bit. You know, we've got 20 minutes left on a kind of the official time, but we're pretty flexible on that.
I wasn't sure if it was half an hour or an hour. Okay. What should you have asked me? I don't know. You're really good at interviewing. You're like the guy from Hot Ones. I haven't met you, but I'll check it out afterwards. I think, gosh, I don't know. What should I tell you about? I think if you have the chance to go see an immersive show and you're interested in video gaming, but maybe not as interested in theater, you should take that chance. The gamification of live theater, I think, is incredibly exciting. And I think it's so far beyond what like a murder mystery party is. Like if you've ever been to a murder mystery party, that's technically immersive theater, but no one is expecting you to believe it. No one is expecting you to suspend your belief. No one is expecting, suspend your disbelief rather. No one is thinking that you should have a real emotion as a result. So I find that video games give me real emotions. I gasped out loud at the end of Arkham City and got made fun of by my family. And that is really overwhelming for a video game to be kind of happening live around you. And I just really want to encourage everyone in the world to check it out and like feel that same like possibility of what humans can just create and participate in together.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Other than that, it's like I've really been interested in theme park design recently for the same reason. I think any kind of immersive environment is just really good for the soul.
Is that the kind of thing that you'd be excited about playing with in the future, getting involved in sort of theme park as well as the content for it development?
I would. Sometimes I think that I went on the wrong path and should have become a really high-powered business person or executive, and then like become hired by like a famous theme park, and then be creative, and then everyone else could build it. But that ship has sailed.
I
But
don't know. It's when you describe like the idea of your kinds of creation being a theme park and being embedded at that sort of physical level of it. I mean, that's exciting. That's an
I
amazing idea.
agree. It's I'm really interested in things like Disney parks that are run by billionaires, but they hire artists. And the idea of just like, hey, can you just develop a Spider-Man that can flip through the air above guests' heads? You just, here's all the money, you do that. I want to do that so badly. Like if I had billions of dollars to give out, oh my God, like everything
What
would
I'm
be so
hearing
beautiful.
is that if there are any billionaires who end up watching this and are really keen to have somebody who's good at making extraordinary, brilliant environments in which people kind of come alive and feel seen, that you would be open to their call?
I would be very open to their call or their people's call.
Excellent.
But on that note, it's like I've also been looking around Vancouver at different weird places you could have theater. And there are lots of weird places you could have theater. It's just a matter of getting the people on board who are not necessarily artists themselves. There's an example, a dream of mine is, you know, the old zoo at Stanley Park?
Yeah.
Well, you know, the polar bear pit is still there. I think
Okay.
it'd make an amazing theater. Like if they dressed it up, it's just been sitting there since the polar bear died. And I think it'd be a wonderful fireproof like sideshow place. Like Van Dusen Gardens would be an amazing place for an immersive experience any kind. And I just hope, I hope over time more businesses get more interested in sponsoring artists to create art in their spaces. That would be a dream. Um, Nemo talking about funding. Funding is tricky if you're not a not-for-profit organization. There's different large corporations like TELUS, for example, is a really good example of one that will give projects money, but you have to be not-for-profit. So what I see happening then is theater companies that are putting on work by other people, you know, good regional theaters putting on Matilda or Company or just like well-known shows are getting that funding, but like more indie artists aren't getting it. So it's kind of too bad. But at the same time, the Canada Council for the Arts is not like a bad institution, and they have a ton of funding that is available for people who just want to explore and create. So you say, this is my project, I want to build it, will you give me enough money to support myself while I build it? And they will say yes or no. And I think that's really positive. The unfortunate thing about Canada versus the USA is I've really found that, and I mean, I can't speak exactly to why it is because I am not American myself, but I did go to school in the States. And I think Americans as a culture have really want to be perceived a certain way, which lends itself to high school theater programs, college theater programs, and adult theater experiments being supported in a way that I don't see here. In Canada, I think it feels less safe to just go out and do it and take a risk. You know that funding is hard to come by and the audiences are hard to come by. And like in Vancouver, especially, people are hard to convince to leave the house when it's not a pandemic. It's just a weird culture here. So that's the thing I really miss about the States is how excited people get about art.
I think I might at this point open things up. So we've been having some really neat comments and discussion in the text, but we can open things up for more general kind of Q&A and interaction if you're up for that.
Yeah.
So that folks feel free to unmute yourselves and to jump into the discussion more actively if you want.
No, you don't have to.
You don't have to at all.
That's actually a big goal of mine since now I'm going to fill some space. I always think Vancouver would benefit from being a bit New Yorkier. And the beautiful thing about New York is that like almost no one's a native New Yorker. Those that are a little bored with life, but everybody goes to New York to create things. So they're all working very hard all the time. There's no entitlement, not at the indie theater level in New York. Everyone is there to like do it. And they create amazing things with small budgets and weird venues, and people go and support them. And I wish Vancouver was a little more like that. And I'm starting to see it. Like Sean Farquhar, who's one of the best magicians in the whole world, he rented a storefront, turned it into a speakeasy, and did a magic show there. And the pandemic closed it, but he did it for months. It was awesome and so cute. Phoebe, I studied at AMDA in the United States. It's a conservatory musical theater program near Lincoln Center, and they give you a work visa for a year, which is why I chose that place. Hi, Nemo.
I have a follow-up question to that, which is not just related to, it's not related to the audience, it's actually related to the performers. So I feel like there's actually a lot of like similarities in our producer mindset. However,
Cool.
The biggest hurdle I've run into is actually getting buy-in from your cast and getting buy-in from like the cast and crew and everybody who's supporting the project. In a similar way, how I see audiences being really disconnected and kind of like wishy-washy about things. But one of your successes seems to be getting really, really good people and getting them to be like super committed to what you're doing and giving it 110%. So how do you do that?
Well, I'm glad you perceive it that way. Thank you. It's really hard because I don't want to say something braggy, but I think I'm good at building people up and showing them where they could fit into my vision. So it's like, when I found a friend of mine who I thought would be a wonderful Alice in Alice in Glitterland, I sat down and I explained, you're a beautiful dancer. I don't feel you get enough opportunities for leads, and I think that you should play this part instead of making her audition. And we just had a sort of sincere conversation about it. And as a neurodiverse individual, I'm very bad at being anything but sincere. I don't understand how to not be. And I think that's very helpful. But when I don't get buy-in, I don't want to use any specific examples. If someone struggles in a show and they find that it's not for them, but they don't want to quit, I just work specifically with them. I'll be like, I'll see where they're struggling in dance. I'll spend extra time with them. I'll talk to them on the phone. We'll find it out. But I think a lot of the tailoring shows to being good for different levels goes a long way to having the cast feel safe. So it's like in Alice in Glitterland, it was a dance show. We hired some professional dancers, but like one of the actors was a martial artist and wasn't as familiar with counting to 8. So we taught them how, and they had a great time. And gosh, it's hard to answer that question. I just think I have such enthusiasm and love for every person ever, and it really is real, and it really is right here, and I just want to share that with everybody. So I think just if you make yourself vulnerable to your cast, then they will make themselves vulnerable back, I hope.
Yeah. All right. I really love your talk.
Thank you.
And I was just thinking about kind of all the things, and now with the pandemic and how it's affecting theater, but also the opportunities with Daniel and us to like find a way to do more immersive stuff. My first question is, in terms of your previous shows before the pandemic, how were you typically able to incorporate like audience participation, but then transitioning, how do you see audience participation happening virtually?
Well, I mean, this is like audience participation, right? I think it just depends on the story. And I don't think, oh gosh, there are theater companies that are doing shows entirely virtually right now, and people are buying in just fine. Like, people want to connect with each other so badly that if you say these are the rules of the game and this is what's happening, as long as you are presenting a good product, they want to buy into it.
Okay.
So I've seen immersive theater shows that didn't adequately train their audience and that didn't adequately train their actors. So you need, regardless of whether you're in virtual space or normal live person meet space, your actors need to be able to help people. The actors and the audience need to be on the same page about how much touching is happening, and the actors need to be trained to be intimate with people without frightening them. So I work with an intimacy director. And I think even in virtual space, it's like you have to know what to ask people and what to say to people to feel intimate without breaching their privacy. So an example of how I do that in live action, it's like you want someone to feel like your character is being sexual with them, but you don't want to cross their boundaries. So you can touch their extremities, you can touch their hands and their arms. Anywhere on the arm is very intimate. I wouldn't touch them on the legs or the torso, but what I always tell people, if you want to if the audience member is seeming open to you, you touch their hair. And that feels very intimate to someone, but it's not the same as being touched on like the stomach. And it's something you find through experimentation and talking and communication, because different people have different limits. So you have to be able to find these things that work for almost everybody.
Right.
To do it in virtual, sorry, go ahead.
Because also my thoughts are also in terms of basics of like not only physical, but like more on the basis of just like, say, having even like ways of altering the storyline of, say, giving the audience an opportunity to say, where maybe a character in the story would ask a question to the audience and they would answer back, of like almost kind of like semi-improvisation. Because one thing I've experienced that I've really enjoyed in terms of just casual theater is participating in improv, where they have the opportunity to give a chance for the audience to kind of participate in how the story plays out and the experience. And then you're also kind of free to experiment, and maybe, I don't know how much in your script writing you offer a little bit of improvisation for certain actors, but I find that also valuable because it gives that experience more authenticity to it.
Absolutely. Well, there's two ways of doing it. So I have a show called Slumber Here, which is an immersive version of A Midsummer Night's Dream, where there are multiple possible endings, all written on iambic pentameter, and it depends on the quests that you complete. So the audience can complete, I forget how many because we haven't produced it in a long time, but let's say there's 8 total quests. And if you complete 4 of them, you get this ending. If you complete 6, you get this ending. If you complete 8, you get this ending. But often what you do in an immersive show is you give the illusion of improvisation, but it's not really there. So I might ask, and another thing is like, you don't say like, what was the worst moment of your life, unless you really want to be edgy. I don't recommend it, but you might say something like, what do you wish would happen tomorrow? And no matter what they say, it's going to be something. And you can be like, oh, really? Me too, or whatever you plan. And then you can move on with it. But the audience member, and you still had a real conversation, they still can confess something real to you. When we did Alice in Glitterland, we had a sequence where the White Rabbit would take you to a little room with real white roses in it and give you some red paint and have a little chat with you while you were painting your white rose red. And he would just ask you little questions about your life, and it didn't change the scene at all, but people still loved it because people want to express themselves. So I would worry less about having a real conversation and more about allowing the audience to share their ideas with you. All they want is to share. They don't need to have a big like an analysis of it.
That's cool.
Yeah. But I mean, like, it just depends on the show, of course. Like at an improv show, all bets are off.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting thinking about the levels of agency for the audience within those different modes, because in video games so often people are used to being central to whatever's going on, or even if they're slightly peripheral, having major impacts in where it goes. And again, taking Alice in Glitterland as an example, in that kind of an immersive theater piece, even just the smallest expression of self being put into this larger knife thing that's going on feels very powerful. So it's interesting looking at what are the different the expectations and sort of the different baggage that we bring to different environments like theater or video game, and how we get to when you're creating it, how you get to try to sort of play with those, and like how do you use those in a way that's respectful, but is able to build off of what people's already existing kind of norms and expectations for that environment are.
Exactly. So the important thing is like audience perception versus what's really happening, because you also have a time limit. And that's always something to remember. So like in Alice in Glitterland, for example, there's this little monologue Alice has about choosing favorite colors and not wanting yellow to feel left out. And then she says, what's your favorite color? And you can say whatever color you want. And she will improvise one sentence response. You know, you'll say yellow and be like, oh, that's why you remind me of sunshine or something. I'm making it up. But that's still a real interaction. It's just, even though you feel like it's about you, it's really not. But it is, because the whole show is designed for you to have a wonderful time at it. But yeah, it's tricky. And I don't want to say that it's disingenuous, because the opportunities are given there like wholeheartedly, but it's also engineered.
When you talk about sort of the Vancouver theater scene and how it would be kind of neat if there was a little bit more of that New Yorkiness that's there, what are the things that you feel like they're the almost like the low-hanging fruit? Where does it feel like the Vancouver scene is headed or could head, and what are the nudges that it might benefit from to get there?
It would be really nice if there was a large-scale theater in Vancouver that produced original work. I think, I mean, Geekenders is successful, but we can't touch a whole summer of performances at Tuts or at the Arts Club or whatever. And it's sort of like a monopoly situation. It's not their fault. I'm happy that they're successful, but I wish more people would just take a chance on original content. It's the only way to grow it. And I think it's possible. I think people our age and I'm in my 30s, are all trying to change the landscape. And I think it might be when we're older that it changes, but any evolution is positive, I think.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question and see if this is even vaguely possible? Has anybody ever considered like doing a theater pass where it's like getting season tickets to the symphony, but it's for smaller local productions. So you've paid into it already. So you've already like committed to going, and it's up to you whether you show up or not.
That's awesome.
I know I've seen like a little bit of that, but
yeah, I mean,
like, it's trying to get people out for each individual show, and like it's just that hurdle each time.
Yeah, like a partnership with like 3 or 4 companies would be really beautiful. And I mean, the Fringe Pass I think is wonderful because it you have to use all 8 shows, so you might discover something that you wouldn't have otherwise seen. I think that's an amazing idea, Nemo. I think that's amazing. I will percolate.
And one other thing to add to that is also possibly pricing for people on with disabilities who maybe have a lower income bracket as well, right? And
For sure.
so that also I think would assist in just diversifying opportunities for people to enjoy theater.
I agree with you. I mean, with my specific theater company, we only charge over $25 if there's a dinner. It doesn't matter what the show is. I think Alice in Glitterland came to like $16 a ticket or something. It's very important that we're accessible as long as we can still pay everybody. So it's tricky because we're not a not-for-profit model, but we pay everybody, but we also want it to be affordable. And I agree that theater should work harder at making theater accessible for those who are living on disability, because it's not enough money. It is a ridiculously low amount of money. And I hope that does change. And I think it would be cool if even we added a ticket that was even cheaper for people who were living on a fixed income. And I will write that down right now.
Companies where they kind of do like you can purchase a ticket to gift, or you intentionally purchase a ticket that's more expensive.
Yeah.
So that the company is still like the actors are still getting paid. There's no concerns about that, with the express intent of the cheaper ticket or a free ticket going to someone who's low income.
Totally. We've been on our crowdfunding campaigns, and we don't usually do very many, but when we do, 2 of the rewards are buy a ticket for an Indigenous local artist or buy a ticket for an underprivileged artist in town. And then we just do it by draw, or we donate the tickets to a charity, or like, it just depends on the situation. But I hope more people become more aware. I think theater around the time of Cameron McIntosh and the major blockbuster bloated musicals of the 80s, which I still love, really gave people a cynical idea of what theater is. And of course, everything is a business and everybody has to survive, but I don't think thinking of theater corporately is good for the form.
Neat question from Phoebe there in the chat around theater business models being really tough because it's uncertain, and any other funding models or ideas that you've seen that aren't ticket-based?
Not really. I'd be interested in hearing more about it. Like, honestly, it's difficult because of fire codes. So even when we give away tickets for free, which we often do, we only have so many. But, you know, when it comes to things like Slumber Here, for example, we did that in partnership with the Surrey Arts Center. Tickets were $5 and just guaranteed your spot, really, because the problem with giving away free tickets is then people don't use them, but they don't cancel. So it's a tricky problem to solve when there's no space for everybody to come.
Nice. Thank you so much for taking the time, especially on the 31st, you know, end of the year, to come in and talk. So totally inspiring. I always find anytime that we get to talk about what it is that you do, yeah, I come away charged, and with that same sense you're talking about, of like, I leave the conversation with that sense of possibility and all of the things that are to come. So
I feel the same, but about you. Yeah, thank you. Everything, you're like, I don't know, I feel like I create art and you're like a fairy godfather. Like, you're amazing.
Well, bibbidi bobbidi boo to you.
Bippity boppity boo to you.
Thanks again, and have a wonderful New Year's Eve.
You as well. Happy New Year, everybody.